predicated on how people relate to me, as if I am the center of the universe. Yeah. So if somebody shows their nice qualities to me, I call them a nice person. If they show their good qualities to somebody who I don't like, then they're not a nice person. They have the same good qualities, but it's depending who they show them to. Or they get angry, they have a temper tantrum. Okay? If they lose their temper at me, this is really a big deal. You know, how can somebody dare lose their temper at me? Don't they know who they're talking to? This is me. Okay? Whereas if somebody loses their temper at somebody who we don't like, good God, then they become our friend, don't they? They have the same angry temper, yeah. But if they show it towards somebody who we don't like, smart guy. So, you know, you can see we're completely biased, aren't we? We're the ones who create our friends. We're the ones who create our enemies. It's not that friends, enemies, and strangers are objective entities outside of us, but we create them because we categorize people and relate to them in terms of how they relate to me, the center of the universe. Okay? So it's totally subjective. Now, there's not 1 ounce of truth in any of this, because the person that we think is so awful, somebody else loves and praises up and down. And the person we think is so wonderful, somebody else says, ugh. Okay? So, you know, all this is just created by our own mind, based on me. So, you know, one of the first things we have to do in our practice, if we're going to, you know, generate bodhicitta, or even if we're going to live a happy life, is to get rid of these bumps, to get rid of this attachment and aversion and apathy. Okay? So one way to do it is by seeing that it all comes from our mind, that it's all totally self-created, you know, all just opinions, and to see how totally transient and fickle our mind is. Because one day somebody's nice to us, oh, you're so wonderful, let's get married. Then the next day, yeah, they criticize us, ugh, I want a divorce. Yeah, from one day to the next, it changes, doesn't it? You know, one day we want somebody to be very loving. The next day we want them to give us our space. Okay? We're totally fickle. Yeah? And then we, you know, not realizing this, we judge other people for what's coming from our own mind. Okay? So just realizing how our mind is creating this is a big step in starting to let it go. Yeah? And then seeing how these roles can change from one day to the next, it helps us see that somebody is not an inherent friend or an inherent enemy or an inherent stranger. Because, for example, when we came in to our life, everybody was a stranger to us. We didn't have one friend when we were born. Everybody was a stranger. Then, as time went on, some people went into the friend category. Then some people went into this enemy category. Some people stayed as strangers. Then more time went out. Some of the friends now went into the enemy category. And some of them went back to the stranger category. And some of the enemies we got to know in a different situation, and they became our friends. And then some of the enemies went back to becoming strangers. So it changes all the time. So therefore, there's no sense in forming a very rigid image of somebody, you know, and a rigid opinion of what somebody's like, because we see that relationships are constantly in flux. And the more we look at it and see how our mind creates these rigid categories, the more we can also see how painful these rigid categories are. Because when we make somebody into an enemy, are we happy? We keep on thinking it's their fault. You know, you're my enemy because it's something in you. You know, you're deficient, you're this, you're that, we blame them. But half the time, our enemies used to be friends. In fact, sometimes the people who are our worst enemies were the people that we were the most attached to before. Isn't it? For example, who are you meaner to? Strangers or the people you love? When you get angry, who do you get the most angry with? Strangers or the people you love? Hello? Hello? Who do you get angrier with? The people that you love. Would you ever say to a stranger what you would say to somebody who's a family member? No. We would never be that impolite to a stranger. But to a family member that we love, oh, all sorts of garbage comes out of our mouth, doesn't it? Totally uncontrolled flow of garbage towards the people we love. So you can see, you know, one day somebody's a loved one, next day we can't stand them. Then they're a loved one, then we can't stand them. It's all coming from our own mind. It's not because of them, it's because of our judgments and opinions. So just realizing that can help us equalize things. And